First up, we have Raising the Roof on Facility Mapping with ArcGIS Indoors. Today we have Jonathan Hodel with Cloudpoint Geospatial. He will be planning on taking questions at the end, so if you want to save your questions, just put them in the chat, and then all the Q&A will be answered at the end. All right, welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you, Lori. It's good to be here with you today. Special thanks to you for your work and the committee and the Platinum sponsors you mentioned as well. And also want to say hello to all my WLA friends. I miss seeing you in person, but certainly hope in the near future we'll be able to gather again. So glad to be here today to talk about indoor mapping, facility mapping with ArcGIS Indoors. Today I'll cover, basically I have a dozen slides or so. We'll talk about ArcGIS Indoors, what it is, some of the components of it, and then we will look to ArcGIS Pro to show you some, hopefully some live demos there, and then we'll look at some examples following that of the Indoors in action. So jumping right into things, give you a brief overview there of what we're looking at. The examples. Oh, and then at the end, especially I want to touch on the successes and some of the challenges or issues that we've encountered as we've worked with ArcGIS Indoors solution and gone through the process. So let's take a look here. So how is GIS used for indoor mapping on a high level? And we've all probably heard of the system of record and system of engagement from Esri. And now there's the system of systems and all kinds of system of things. But for today, we're talking about with the Indoors, we're going to start with spatial data, your floor plans, system of record might be your facility information. Maybe folks have a database of, facility work orders. And then the system of engagement for what we're talking here would be our web apps, kiosks, which I'll show you, ops dashboard. We're not going to look at one of those today, but another way to engage, as well as the Indoors mobile app. And then we'll briefly touch on indoor positioning systems. So how is it used specifically? Some ways that indoor mapping is being used in GIS. Facility management's a big one. Space management and real estate. Space management being, is this conference room being utilized enough? Are there other conference rooms available is kind of an example with that space management. Interactive turn-by-turn directions, life safety, emergency responders, and then the ability to use it in real time with things like GeoEvent, and then having it be, as we talk to facility managers, what we're explaining this is as a centralized repository of all of your as-built data as well. It can be beneficial for that. And then, of course, as you connect multiple facilities across a campus, you can turn that into essentially a campus management system. So what is ArcGIS Indoors? In my own words, what I describe it as a collection of tools that basically streamline the process of bringing in CAD or BIM data into GIS to be able to utilize the GIS as your source. And that's really what Esri has here with ArcGIS Indoors, is it's a solution that streamlines that workflow. The components of it, so basically there's an information model. It's called the AIIM, ArcGIS Indoors Information Model, that is provided by Esri. There's also a list of GP tools, which you can kind of see on the right side of my screen, a list of those GP tools that come with the solution. There's a product data folder you can download from the My Esri website as you download the Arcgis Pro install. And then, of course, it requires special licensing from Esri. Your enterprise, or now Arcgis Online, brand new, it has the ability to be enabled for ArcGIS Indoors. I'm still waiting on Esri to enable ours, but as of just recently, you're now able to apparently use ArcGIS Online for that. Other things, so it includes these standard GIS layers, which we'll look at, that are part of the solution. And the idea is you curate data in ArcGIS Pro, you populate your different layers, and then you publish those to web maps, and then those can be consumed in primarily one thing is the indoor viewer, which we'll look at. That's Esri's configurable web app that comes with the indoor solution. And it's a very, very nice template and web app. One of the important things is we import CAD data, it must be clean, and that's very important. Clean CAD data or BIM data can both be brought into this using Pro. If you use scanning, 3D scanning, then it's a little bit different workflow, but today we'll focus on the CAD part. And then publishing the web apps and mobile maps, and then lastly, the indoor viewer. Technical requirements, so you can run it with ArcGIS 2.5. We had been running it on 2.5. We just upgraded to Pro 2.6, but we found that when our enterprise portal was on 10.8, we were not able to run 2.6. So we had to upgrade our enterprise portal to 10.8.1, and now we can run ArcGIS Pro 2.6, which is what I'll be showing you today. You need the advanced user type with a publisher role for that organization. And then you need access to these extensions. And all of this, just to point out, all of this comes with the indoor package as a solution. When an organization purchases the indoors licensing, all of this comes along with it. So how does it work? The process, kind of at a high level, you download and install it and configure it. So we get it set up in our Pro and in our enterprise organization. And then we basically create the Scratch geodatabase using their model. And there's a GP tool that we'll look at to create the geodatabase. Then we load the floor plans and points of interest. When I say load, I mean bring them in from CAD, or otherwise, like I said, you have to create those by going from scan to floor plans. The points of interest are very important. These are kind of the backbone of the routing network. So you have to have points of interest in order to create directions and navigable, points of interest. That's kind of what they serve as. In addition to a way to explore your data, as we'll see in the examples, the points of interest are very important. Then you also, if you want to do the turn-by-turn directions, you want to have navigation, you got to create the network. So we'll take a look at that. And then author the map or the web scene. In this case, you can do both. And those are both capable of plugging into the indoor viewer. Then lastly, publishing and deploying for the final step. So I want to stop there just briefly for a moment. Lori's going to help me. We're going to look at a poll here. Just got a few questions if you want to go ahead and run that poll. First one, if you have ever created indoors features using GIS, what was your common source data? So what did you have mostly available to you to start with? Or if you were going to start today, what do you feel like you have mostly available to you to start with?
It looks like they're still rolling in here a little bit. Okay.
And are you able to pull up those results then? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the majority of us haven't done it yet. Other folks say either PDFs or CAD layers, so good. Next one, if your organization used indoor mapping, it would be most useful for basically what application? Would it be facility management, emergency response, visitor engagement, or space management or navigation? If you were to use indoors in the near future, if you're not already using it, what would you anticipate it being most beneficial for?
Still got a couple more. Okay.
Okay, so the majority of us say facility management, emergency response is a close second. Okay, very interesting. And lastly, our biggest obstacle, if you had to say what your biggest obstacle is for using indoors spatial data, what is it? Available funding? Excuse me, is it available data, funding, staffing, interest or management buy-in? What do you see as the biggest obstacle if you were going to try to implement indoors today? So I'll
Okay.
probably stop sharing for you, Lori.
Yep, I'll share those results.
There we go. Okay. So primarily biggest obstacle would be tied between funding and interest. And I would definitely agree with those two. Part of it is convincing users of the benefits of it and really showing them how it can really be a cost savings. So yeah, very good to know. Okay, so moving on, some examples. Here we have just building locations. If you're looking at a campus-wide site, one of the key things is just first of all going to be which facility are we talking about? That seems to be a major component of what campuses need to know these days. Is just first of all starting at a high level, which facility are we looking at? So that's one example. Mobile editing is another one. So using Collector, it can integrate with the maps that we're working with for indoors. So Collector would be if we're going around and gathering indoor assets. Maybe those are fire extinguishers, alarms, control panels, utility connections, things like that. It would be really beneficial having this, being able to tie this in with the indoor positioning system. To be able to collect that data. But right now, I'm not sure actually if Collector ties in with the IPS, but I know the Indoors app does, but the Indoors app is primarily for viewing and navigation. So mobile reporting, here I have a Survey 123 example. We'll take a look at this one in real time a little later, but just the ability to tie in Survey 123 is huge when it comes to indoors and being able to effectively gather that information and interact with the data. So ArcGIS Indoors Mobile. So the mobile app is native, similar to Esri's other native applications. And I want to just pull up this web page here to take a look. So this is the basically the API. It talks about the or APK, excuse me, for Android. If we pull in a little closer, and I don't have a live demo of the mobiles, that's why I want to just look at a few of these screenshots to kind of get a feel for what it looks like. You have your basic campus map in the map view. You see the 1, 2, and 3 on the bottom left of the map screen. That's a toggle for the different floor levels. You can easily jump between floor levels. The Explorer down below, these are your categories, which I'll explain more of those later, but this is how you interact with your data. Esri's standard categories are shown here: people, places and things, retail, and safety and security. Those are Esri's out of the box configurable categories. However, you can tweak those and add to them, and you can have subcategories to these as well, which is really helpful, really helps with user engagement. There is this concept called events within the mobile app and within the indoor solution as well. So you might be able to schedule different things, reserve conference rooms. Hoteling seems to be a big thing these days with people coming back to work from COVID. As we migrate back in the workplace, the idea of being able to share space and reserve it, and it's called hoteling. That's a big use case for indoors. This example just gives you different features, your nearest features. Show me the nearest ATM, you know, how to, and then route directions turn by turn to that location. And then an example of being able to save your favorite places. And of course, navigation is a big one. Being able to start those turn by turn navigations and routing. And the nice thing is, with a good quality indoor positioning system, as you change levels, your map will also change as well as you navigate across a campus or across a building. That's when you hear, Esri uses this term a lot called floor aware. So when you hear something is floor aware, that's essentially what it means, is it's able to easily navigate and differentiate between the floor levels of a building. Okay, so that's a brief look at the mobile app, and basically you would download this mobile app. You would have to be, have your enterprise portal set up for Indoors. You would, as the curator or creator, you would publish a map package, an MMPK, and you would publish that and be able to access that through your Indoors mobile app. Routing and navigation is a big one, and we'll take a look at this example. Being able to save staff time, engaging with the public. We've got a kiosk example we'll show that's with a cemetery and mausoleum. It's a setup in their to set up in their lobby where you have users coming in and engaging with that. Reporting and analytics. So this one is an example of this is Esri's dashboard I snagged from them, basically showing a simple work order application. These work orders can be integrated through the 311 system with the Indoors mobile app. So as you see here, you've got work orders on the left that have come in that are not completed, as well as a list of work orders that are completed. And then you can have the different, the different lists there on the bottom of how many orders there are active currently. So a good way to engage with the data, and we've probably all seen the dashboards before, but very helpful, especially with the Indoors view. So talking about IPS, indoor positioning systems, or real-time locating systems, RTLS is another word for that, especially if you're talking about tracking assets. And this is a big thing. I think we're going to see a lot more. It's not just navigation, but it's kind of a combined system where users can navigate throughout a facility as well as being able to track assets. So for hospitals, that might be their equipment. I saw an example of a Home Depot that was literally tracking like the heavy carts, and it showed them in real time, just tracking them throughout the store. So pretty fascinating, some of the use cases. And I've been surprised at how much the retail industry uses Indoors. The Home Depots, some of the big box stores are really starting to adopt this technology. That was kind of surprising to me, but it makes sense when you think about all it can do as far as being able to target the consumer as well, based on their location throughout the store. Okay, so now I will go ahead and move into the demonstration portion. We're going to look at ArcGIS Pro. I'd like to walk through some of the basics of being able to go through the geoprocessing tools and kind of what those are involved with. And then looking at the viewer, we'll look at it from the configuration side, as well as being able to explore it from an end user point of view. And then we'll look at a couple AGO samples that I've created that really don't use the total indoor solution. They just use AGO, but they're using the Indoors information model. So we'll take a look at some of those examples as well. Okay, so ArcGIS Pro. So here I've got a test project. We've got some CAD data here. I would imagine this is a very common, it's going to be a common workflow as we use Indoors. As we expand on our CAD data, we know that we've got a lot of different lines here. What we see here in the table of contents, these kind of represent the different layers in our CAD data. So the idea is you would have consistent CAD standards across your entire campus. And so Esri realizes that, hey, let's come with a configurable way to import this CAD data across the campus and utilize those standards that we have in place. So if we can look here again at the Indoors tools and geoprocessing tools, the first one we'll look at here is create Indoors database. So I'm going to go ahead and run this tool. Now what we're doing is, and again, I have to be signed into my portal. I'm signed into our Indoors server here. I have to be signed in order to use these tools. Otherwise, it won't even let us take advantage of those. And it's being a little slow on me here. Tools not licensed. Okay, there you go. So that's what happens when you're not licensed for it. So let me see here if we can. Okay, well, that's not good. I think I lost my portal connection. It says it's not available. Let me check and see if my server's running, which it is. Portal connection. Let's try refresh. So we run our indoor server on an EC2, on an Amazon EC2, and we do have it set to timeout occasionally. And I don't know if that's causing an issue, but tell you what, why I restart Pro, why don't we go ahead and take an opportunity to see if anybody has any questions so far.
You did have one in the chat there from Tanya. She
Okay.
says, she wants information on the cemetery kiosk and who built it, etc.
Okay, yeah, we will look at that as one of muted. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've done a few cemetery yards, and one in particular that had a mausoleum really wanted their users to be able to engage with the mausoleum or in the yard, and that's one of the reasons that one of the reasons they wanted us to design the kiosk for them. So we will take a look at that as a good use case. Okay, unable to establish connection. Well, this is pretty unfortunate because a lot of what I wanted to show is going to require me to have my portal up and going. Unable to establish connection. If any of you enterprise experts out there have some advice on this, feel free to chime in. Unfortunately, it was working right before, and now it's decided to quit. But I'll pull up another project too, and we'll see if that works. We can still talk about the basics. I just wanted to show you these tools in action, but we might just have to wait for another day for that one. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, still giving me an issue here.
Nina says maybe it's your
Imagery.
VPN connection.
Yeah, I don't think so. I haven't changed anything, and I just tried this like an hour before just to make sure everything was working, but that's kind of the way it goes, isn't it? I'm going to try to restart it, see what happens. Restart my instance and see if that'll help. That'll take a little while. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep going on things without that, and we'll try to do the best we can here. So as I said, the workflows are create indoors database. So that basically what that's going to give us is, if I pull up, we'll take a look at our catalog. What that's doing when we create the database is, let's look under here. You have to create an empty database first, which I had as my indoors project. My indoors test is something I've already completed this process on. So I had an empty geodatabase. This is what it creates when you run the create indoors database. It creates the indoors data set here, which this is all of your different layers and polygons and features. So details would be like your walls and doors. This is a line feature class. Windows, I mean, you name it. This is any kind of line features within your CAD data. And then events is a point feature class. which can represent the different events that we talked about if you want to reserve something, or, you know, in the case of the cemetery yard, we had funerals were our events for that one. Facilities is the buildings layer. So you could essentially use building footprints for this. We just want to clean those up and make sure those are nice and tight. Levels is another polygon layer. Each level is represented by a separate polygon. So for a basic, you know, 3-story building, your 3 levels might look the same. They might be the same look and shape. But I know, like with Esri in their example, is I think it's building L or M, there's the open like mezzanine area. So on your lower floor, you know, you see the entire polygon for the level, but as you, in your second floor, because there's a mezzanine, you have a hole in that polygon. So you would see that in your levels layer. And points of interest, we talked a little bit about that already. Sections would be if you want to break it down in the example I'm going to show you. The sections represent like an apartment. We have a assisted living complex, and we have the different apartments within that assisted living are represented by the sections layer. And then the rooms are broken down. Those are actually the units. Site would be similar to your whole campus. So that would typically be like maybe a parcel for your whole site. Tracking zones, haven't worked a lot with tracking zones. I think that's more for your IPS systems, being able to integrate those. And then zones might be like for a hospital, maybe they have a zone 4, zone 5, a certain section of the building that way. So those components are what it creates when it creates the database. And then also, if we look at the tools, so we got generate occupancy features or occupant features. This would be if you have a spreadsheet of all of your people in the entire building, and you have the room ID listed in that spreadsheet, and you had their name. This would basically be a simple little script to be able to join your occupants listed with your actual data in your indoors drawing. So that's what that's for. It basically creates points of interest for all of your people in the building. Import floor plans to indoors. This is what I wanted to show you in real time, but we'll just kind of talk about it here. So basically this is saying, okay, I've got a CAD file, CAD layers. I'm going to import those into my indoors database. The key with this one is having an Excel file, which Esri provides a configurable Excel sheet to be able to enter that information. So here I have specified where my CAD drawing lives, and then some facility information along with that. And you can there's these 3 different sheets to utilize for that. So that's a key part of having being able to run that tool, floor plans to indoors. And then these other ones under indoors network all have to do with the routing. And we can touch on those if we can look at this other example it'll show as well. Okay, so now I want to look, if we jump over to this other project here, let me pull this into my screen. So this is one we've been working on currently. This is a local nursing home, and essentially what we've got is basically a way to, we had to generate the pathways. So these would be walking paths that you see here that are generated using the indoors tools. So the steps are basically, and I think we saw this in the toolbox, it was the generate pathways, generate indoor pathways. What you get after you generate the indoor pathways is a bit of a mess, but you can understand it here, hopefully, as I explain it. This is what you get when you generate pathways. You get potential walking paths throughout the entire facility. What we've done when we ran this tool, it asks you to specify your barriers. So we have specified our walls as in our stairs and things like that as a barrier. So in other words, don't create a mesh over those areas, and it also allows you to put in a little a buffer distance there. So that's what we've ran here in order to generate what it's called preliminary pathways. So this is like, you know, what you start with. Then you run this tool called thin indoor pathways, And this is where that advanced license comes into play. This uses some of the advanced tools in Arc Pro, the GP tools that's running behind the scenes in order to thin these pathways down. So what you get is, after you thin the pathways, you get a little bit of what we call the circuit board look. The idea with the circuit board is these are your optimized routes. If we tried to create a route network with this, it might work, but it's really going to be slow when we go to actually do routing and directions. So with the thin pathways, now we have an optimized route network. And you can see these are all potential paths that it's taking through hallways, and these are also sorted by level. So I've got my range filter on here, and I can sort those as you see my details update there. So you'll notice the points of interest are key, because as it thins those pathways, as it goes from this to this, it's saying, where are my points of interest? That's helping it decide how it wants to thin those pathways out. Okay, so we have our pathways thinned at that point. The next thing we're going to do is add what's called transitions. So you'll notice I have a staircase here, okay? And I actually have a couple outdoor staircases. You can't really see them, but there's also what we call a transition. A transition simply connects your two levels. A transition connects your levels through typically either stairways or elevators. So it's a way to tie your different levels of your route network together. That's what transitions are. And there's a tool in here called Generate Floor Transitions, which is able to kind of help kickstart that, so to speak, that process. But we found in our situation, we found it more advantageous just to create the transitions manually. One of the tricks with creating those transitions, however, is, as we see here, you have to do this in a 3D environment. And the reason is, in this case, you can see my multiple levels. So here's level 1 is larger. The basement is a little bit smaller. But we have transitions in here, and I want to look particularly at one over here. As we see these transitions, hopefully you guys can see this okay. It's a little bit hard to tell, but basically what's going on is I've got the one on the right is, you can kind of see it here, straight up and down. This is an elevator shaft. The one on the left here, you can see kind of where it takes a turn in the middle. That's actually a flight of stairs that has a landing in the middle of it. So as we do our 3D editing, we want to be able to really mimic our stairwells in as much detail as we can. And that involves some manipulating in 3D and using those vertice elevations. So 3D is definitely a key component of the indoors solution, being able to use indoors. So that's that was something for us. We had some 3D experience, but not much. Now, as we've done work in indoors, we've gotten much more comfortable with it. But it's definitely some tricks to learn on that and being able to utilize the 3D capabilities. But that's very important, especially if you're going to go and then generate a web scene. If we turn on our other layers here, I've got my units and details showing up in 3D. So as we navigate, we can kind of see that. And then as well, if I navigate to the other level as well. Whoops. Okay, so next we will, let's kind of jump into the next part of the demo. And here we're going to look at, if our portal's up and running, maybe we can look at the configuration of this. And I don't think it's working. Okay, not working. So I will do my best to explain it. I'm trying to think if I got another example we can look at. Basically, what I wanted to show you is the configuration of the indoors viewer. So the process would be, let's go back to our nursing home project here. So you'd have the floor plans here. which we'll see on this, I call it a web map just because
Are
that's
you
my
kidding me?
one that I publish.
Sure.
I hear some background there. So this is the web map, prepping for that, being able to publish it, and what we'd see with our layers. And again, we have our levels toggle. So the gray layer represents our facility, and then I'm toggled on level, what I'm calling level 0, which would be the basement, and then I can navigate, to level 1. This little Rangefinder tool is an immense help when it comes to being able to work with the different levels and layers here when it comes to the buildings. And for those who haven't worked with that before, it's under this range tab up here. And the way you set that is under your properties of your layer. There's this thing called range, and you can tell it which field you want to control your levels with. So mine's called vertical order, and all of my polygons are either associated with vertical order 0 or 1, and that's what I can toggle on and off in the view here. So really helpful tool if you haven't used that before. So basically, we would publish the web map to our portal, and then once we have that web map published in portal, then we would essentially just create a web app using a configurable template. So similar to Web App Builder, you can use any of the standard Web App Builder ones, but when you have your Indoors solution license, you now have a configurable app called the Indoor Viewer. It's a really nice web app, being able to utilize that and take advantage of it. And I, again, apologize, we're not able to see that, but it is showing up in there just like the web app tools and Web App Builder, so you can configure using that template. So once you do that, you have the viewer up and running, then you can enable kiosk mode with that. You have two different modes. You have the web browser mode, then you have kiosk mode. The web browser is more for like a end user that wants to do a little bit more, have some more functionality. Kiosk is just a little bit more locked down because the idea is it's open to the public. But it's nice, you can set a timeout. So after 2 minutes, your kiosk defaults back to the home page and whatnot. So pretty handy tools there. Okay, well, since our portal is not working, let's see if our ArcGIS Online is. So, and actually I already had it pulled up. So this is what it looks like, even though I think this is probably cached because I don't think my portal's working, but let's just see. But this is what the kiosk mode looks like. And here's my different levels of my facility over here. I'll just see if it's going to do anything here. Maybe it is. No, it's really not responding. So this is just more of a cached view we're looking at here. But it gives you a good look and feel of the kiosk. Very user-friendly. I can explore different points of interest. I could search. I could click on these and it would expand. In this case, we have memorials that are either graves in the cemetery or crypts in the mausoleum. If I clicked on that, it would show me all my different options. Basically, I can see them in ascending order and whatnot. But it's more than likely you're going to use the search tool. Places and things. And then safety and security, we've got layers for security cameras, control panels, fire department information can show up under the safety and security function. Directions, pretty self-explanatory. You can select and have directions anywhere throughout the entire facility. And then the events, we can sort by any date. And I've got several here. It's probably not going to find them. But this is where you'd see them show up, and then you can click on one and you can also route directions to those as well. Okay, so moving on to how are we doing on time here? About 10 minutes, Lori? Maybe 5 if we want questions. I think you're muted if you're talking.
You've got till 2. You've got 20 minutes.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, that's fine. I can fill that without a problem, even with our technical issues we've had. So in our samples here, these are all in ArcGIS Online. So again, they're not using Enterprise or Portal. They're not using the Indoor solution. However, I did create these using the data model, the information model that came with Indoors. So the first one I want to look at, and some of this is just kind of the idea conceptually. These examples are more if we want to look at those specific facilities. but the one I wanted to start with was this Village of Roanoke, this facility application. So imagine you are a municipal GIS user or manager. You want to provide your different departments with the ability to access indoors data. And this is what really excites me about this is I think there's opportunities to collaborate with property owners throughout our municipalities with the village or city. I think there's potential with that. I don't know what that looks like, but I do think this could be a tool that we would see that with potentially. The idea being anything I see here in light green would represent a campus that has specific site detail information. So in this case, with my nursing home campus, I would select that site and I can see contact information, the email, the website, but then I could say, okay, I want to dig deeper into this campus and these facilities. So I would say view facility. What this is doing here now is going to pull open essentially my facility manager. This again would be just a dashboard we created in ArcGIS Online. However, if I start to explore this a little bit, I can select one of my buildings. So let's go select the main building. And it gives me a little bit of information on that building. I can, click a link and email and, pull up website information again. I can edit, which will kick me into an editing app since dashboards aren't really created for editing. But now that I've got the building selected, now I can drill down farther. And now let's go to level 2. And so that turned off my basement levels. And then I can say, okay, I am interested specifically in unit 14W. Let's say we have an issue there. So that zooms and brings me into my unit 14W. In this case, this is a residential unit. This would be the bedroom, and they have their own, it's actually a shared bathroom. You can see the doors on each side here. So let's say we have a problem here in unit 14. I'm going to select the room here. And let's say our problem is we've got let's say a broken bed, and I want to be able to report this. So just to have a simple survey 123 built-in connected here through the link. So I'm going to report a problem. And then I can say, hey, we have an issue here we want to report. So it's pulling today's date and my user. And then I can say, okay, I got a furniture issue. I'm going to say bed is broken. And then I could take a photo if I want. Again, I could be doing this on a mobile device. It grabbed and populated all of my room ID information from my indoors layers. And then I'm just going to go ahead and submit that. And then we can, if we're familiar with Survey 123, we can see that with my facilities problem reporter, I have a new problem that was just submitted, furniture and the bed is broken. I could easily create a dashboard with this information and start to show, some of the issues or problems we're having and kind of start to evaluate not only how many problems am I seeing with lighting or furniture, but also are these concentrated for some reason? Do I have a bad circuit that needs to be looked at because I'm having a lot of lighting issues over in, this wing? So you guys being GIS users know the power of tying this into spatial information is just really valuable. Okay, so that's the kind of example there on facility management and how we could utilize that. But I want to go back here and we've done some cool things using our own office space here. So if I look at our indoors office space, we can use this as an example with the facility management, kind of the idea. And, in this case, we could have, what you're seeing here is kind of for lack of a better description, aerial imagery of the indoor, of the building, of the facilities. How we did this was through 3D capture with a 3D camera. And then we were able to take that, and one of the outputs from the camera, not only it's a high resolution camera, so not only do you get essentially a point cloud as a result of your scan, but you also get this kind of this aerial overview, which I really like because it's a nice snapshot. So we can see furniture and desks and different things. I have my different rooms that are numbered. And so if I select this space here, which is my office, you can kind of see, okay, I have just a, kind of a preview here. But what's cool is then I can actually connect this and I can select my image and it'll bring me into the 3D imagery environment. I can see this being really useful for emergency personnel and folks doing emergency response. So this is kind of like your, similar to your Google Street View, being able to navigate there, but this is all through the 3D cameras. And we set up the camera in these different positions where they see the circles, and then to be able to collect this information. And I could see this also being really useful for facility management if you wanted to come and extract data and pull that into your floor plan then. So. Okay, that kind of wraps it up. Just going to go back to the presentation here. So I wanted, before we finish up and open it up to questions, I wanted to just touch on our successes and challenges and any issues we've kind of encountered. Successes, we've successfully seen the indoor-outdoor navigation kind of come together with that campus navigation look and feel, and it's been very beneficial to see that come together. Attribute rules. The indoor solution is very, very attribute heavy or attribute intensive. So attribute rules are key. We've found a lot of benefit from using attribute rules to populate the different fields based on the underlying polygons. For example, my room polygon has to have a level ID. So I want to just grab that from the underlying level polygon. Attribute rules is a perfect way to do that. Editing in 3D, I mentioned that. We learned a lot about editing in 3D. It was very helpful to dive into that. Integrating the different apps, Collector, Survey 123, and dashboards was where we found some good successes, as well as the 3D imagery case I showed you there at the end. Some of the challenges we ran into, the GP tools are very tricky, picky, finicky, whatever you want to say, but it's very sensitive. If you have one misnamed level ID, a lot of times it causes you some issues there. So clean CAD data can be hard to come by. That is so true from what we found. People think their CAD data is in great shape, but actually once you dive into it, it's there seems to be a lot of issues commonly that you come across. And then data reviewer, it's important to understand data reviewer. Esri ships the indoors solution with a ton of batch jobs for data reviewer. It's mind-boggling to me how they can have so many batch jobs in there, but it's part of the data reviewer solution to verify and validate your attributes. By default, it's in metric, WGS coordinate system. We've been able to convert it and with our projects, trying to run those in state plane, but we've seen a few hiccups along the way, just trying to make that conversion happen. Creating good route networks. This is very time consuming, takes a lot of thought and planning, and then also using landmarks for your routing is very important. For example, the landmark would be turn right at the big oak tree, turn left at the nurse's station, whatever you want to call it, but those are landmarks in your routing directions, which is really important. We found that that's key, understanding that. And then the other challenge, of course, indoor positioning systems is still evolving. There's still different processes. We looked at that one slide, but the different systems are beacon systems, Wi-Fi systems, Bluetooth. But what I would recommend, if you're able to do it, of course it's expensive, but if you can utilize, now they have lighting systems, so new lighting, you can get those that are enabled for indoor positioning. And the beauty of that is you don't have to change batteries because they already have power fed to them. And they are also the most accurate type of indoor positioning that you can get. So definitely something to recommend if you're exploring this. Additional resources, I will go ahead and paste these. I got some links. I want to paste these into the chat section. So let me go ahead and do that. And while I'm doing that, you guys can feel free to chime in with any questions, and we can kind of go from there.
I have a question.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So I'm just kind of curious. We've done this like indoor type facilities type GIS layer, nothing compared to this. Prior to the ArcGIS Indoors, we created layers and things like that. Have you ever came across any issues regarding not getting CAD data? Because some of the stuff that that we have are in CAD, and some were not in CAD, and were in like typical architectural plans where we had to go in and digitize that information the best we can. Have you ever come across anything like that?
Yeah, I think that's common. You're going to find where you have to digitize the architectural plans at times. It's not ideal. If you're putting those in ArcGIS and you're putting them in with dimensions, or maybe you have somebody that knows CAD, you can draw them in with the accurate dimensions, but I don't necessarily have any good solutions for that. What we've done in the last example I showed you with our office space, we had to basically digitize those rooms based on the 3D scan that we got. I don't know of an automated way to really generate floor plans and polygons for rooms from a Lidar point cloud. If anybody does, I would love to hear more input on that.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
It looks like there's a question in the chat. What 3D camera do you use with the new iPad Pro with a Lidar Camera Work?
Yeah, great question. So yes, the new iPad Pros with the Lidar camera, they do have the ability to create some 3D scans. I can't tell you as far as accuracy how good those would do. In our case, we used what's called Matterport. You may be familiar with Matterport. That was the 3D camera we utilized, and we purchased the professional grade camera that's on a tripod. It's got a 134 megapixel camera on it, so it's obviously very high resolution. I would love to hear of somebody's experience. If you want to try out an iPad Pro, love to see how that accuracy stacks up. But what we found with our accuracy on our camera from the scan data was typically within about an inch and a half on accuracy for like a typical room if you're measuring dimensions. Anything else?
I am not seeing anything else out there in the chat.
Okay, so I'm 5 minutes early, Lori. Are you gonna forgive me for that?
I think you'll be okay.
All right.
If everybody wants to just stretch their legs for a second, we can take a quick break. First, thank you so much, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you.
Bummer about the portal, but it's kind of like
sorry
par
about
for the
that.
course.
Yeah, technical difficulties happen. All right.
You just have to roll with it. So,
Yep.
So thank you so much. If there's more questions, we can get you Jonathan's contact information. Otherwise, we'll just take a real quick couple-minute break, and we will be back with Bernstein.